Hey, it's Elizabeth D'Alto, and this is the Untame the Wild Soul podcast. From body image, sex, spirituality, money and relationships, to motherhood, creativity, business, communication, and desire, Untame the Wild Soul is the place to come for real stories and powerful advice to help you reclaim and redefine womanhood in the 21st century. What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 197 of the Untame the Wild Soul podcast. I am your host, Elizabeth D'Alto, and today we're talking about personal mastery with Christine Hassler. Christine is another throwback guest. She is a dear friend of mine, and here's what's cool about this conversation. The first time I interviewed Christine on the show, we'd only just met in passing, and we were really just getting to know each other during the interview. Over the last year, we've gotten to know each other really well. Christine actually moved down to where I was in San Diego a couple months before I moved away. So we got to spend a lot of time together. And so this is a deeper conversation, way more connected. In this episode, we explore inner and outer chaos, consciousness in action, not just theory. That's a word you hear thrown around a lot these days. If you pay attention to self-help or personal development, people talk about consciousness all the time. We're getting to some specifics, like what does that actually mean here in the grounded world? We talk about empathy versus sympathy, giving people the dignity of their process. This is huge. And more. Lots of other juicy things. And what I love about Christine is that she has been in the coaching industry since well before it morphed into what it is now. Her perspectives and methods are solid, grounded, and time-tested in both her own life and with her clients. So this is good stuff, people. Enjoy. And I also wanted to share something with you all. So if you listen in real time and you heard the interview last week with Kisma, you might have heard me mention, you might have even gone over to wildsoulmovement.com/survey and filled out our anonymous feedback survey. So as all these responses were coming in, one of the things I noticed is, we really do live in an inundated time. There's social media, there's the podcast, we all have our websites, we send out our emails, and I take for granted sometimes that you guys always know like what we're offering, what our free resources are, and what we've got going on. But some of you in your surveys had written that you wish I would create this, or this, and you listed things that we totally already have for you. So I wanted to just direct you so you know where to find things. If you head on over to wildsoulmovement.com, for those of you who are interested in working with me one-on-one or doing an immersion or coming to an Untame Yourself weekend intensive, if you click on Work With Me, all of my offerings for autumn 2017 and winter 2018 will come up there. Some of those spaces are limited, some of them are not. So check that out. There's an application. I'm scheduling conversations with people, discovery calls to see what's the right and best fit for both of us. So check those out if you are wanting to work with me personally. For free resources at that same website, wildsoulmovement.com, you click on the resources tab. We have tons of free downloads there, as well as some of our favorite podcast episodes. And they're not just our favorites, they're your favorites. And we know this because we base what we feature on that page by how many times they've been downloaded, as well as the popularity just from how many times people share it, the comments we get, and things like that. And then last but not least, a lot of people wrote on their surveys that they wished I would make more guided meditations, or that they could just have a toolkit of resources to use in specific situations. And I made that this summer. It's called the Wild Soul Toolkit, and you can find that at wildsoulmovement.com/toolkit. So there you go. That's where all this stuff is. So if you were wanting any of that, it's all already there for you. That's all the links, as well as the show notes for today's episode. You can find that at untameyourself.com/episode-197. All right, those were all my announcements. Let's get into the show. Everyone, I'm so excited. Christine Hassler is back. The first time, if any of you have listened to Christine's first interview on the podcast, which we'll link it up in the show notes, but the first time we had Christine on, I barely knew her.
Right.
Now she's become a very dear friend. And so there really is always such a different, I know you have a podcast. I know you know this too.
Yeah.
It's such a different energy when you're interviewing someone who you're super curious and interested in their work. Maybe you've read their books or whatever. And someone's like your homie.
Yeah, exactly. I like the homie.
It's so much more fun. So I'll ask you, I don't even remember what you said the first time. It was such a long time ago. What are you loving about being a woman right now?
Oh my gosh, that question, I just have chills up my entire spine. Everything. And sometimes nothing, no. But mostly everything. I love that we're living in a time where I feel like women are leading. I think that we're leading consciousness, we're leading change, we're being chosen, if that's the word, to really shift fast and to break old paradigms. I feel like as women, we are trailblazers. Like I feel like the feminist movement was one big wave of activating a lot of attention and awareness. And now we're really in, what does it really mean to be feminine? What does it really mean to be a woman? And I love that we have permission to explore that now. Like I love it. And I love that also as a woman, we are redefining things. So who I get to be as a woman is not defined. Like I get to create that as a woman. And that's freaking awesome.
Yeah. So, when you said the word consciousness just now, I actually thought of a time, I don't remember where we were, but we were talking about just how certain people act in one particular community we were both not necessarily part of, but in proximity to. Uh-huh. And you said something like, yeah, just like get some consciousness, and not as a judgment, but literally as an assessment. Yeah. How do you define consciousness, right? Because I feel like that's a word that gets thrown around a lot. Like communities call themselves conscious communities, or like, people use that term so much these days. Yeah. How do you define it? Like, what does it actually mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it means a couple of different things to me. One, consciousness means that you're aware that judgment is a very limited lens to look through. Like when we're conscious, we're aware that we're conditioned to be judgmental. We're conditioned to look through the lens of good, bad, right, or wrong. And we're also kind of conditioned to buy into the illusion of separation, that I'm me and you're you, and we're not connected, and I'm not connected to anything bigger than me. And so consciousness starts to expand our awareness and perspective, where we're like, oh, wait a second. Maybe there isn't necessarily good, bad, right, or wrong. Maybe judgment is the thing that reinforces my separation. Maybe there is like some magic to the universe and a oneness that exists. So consciousness is just like being open to that way of thinking and that way of seeing more through the eyes of love and less through the eyes of fear and judgment. And it also means responsibility. So as we grow in consciousness, to me, that means we take responsibility for our lives. We are not victims. We are not blamers. We know that everything that happens or doesn't happen is a result of what we're creating or not creating at the time. And we don't take that responsibility with self-blame, but we take it with, all right, like, if I have this responsibility and if I have the awareness, how am I going to shift to create a different result? And that to me is at the crux of consciousness. It's that level of responsibility. To me, consciousness is not about, well, I do yoga and I drink green juice and therefore I'm conscious. Those are great. Those are great tools. Right. And it's great to do yoga and it's great to eat and drink things that are truly alive. But to me, it's a verb. It's not just a thing. It's not just a description. It is a verb. And it's a constant process. It's a constant process.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's important to acknowledge, I think, like across the board, regardless of someone's circumstances, like we do all have a variety of choices. Some people have access to certain choices that other people don't.
Yep.
But in any given moment, in any given life, there always is like a higher choice. There always is a choice that is going to lead to more consciousness, or that's going to be more expansive for an individual. Again, the context could be so different. I think as well in the times that we're living in right now, people's worldviews, people's literal current circumstances, like you and I are having this conversation after Charlottesville has happened in August of 2017. Hurricane Harvey just happened. Hurricane Irma happened. I think there's another Hurricane Jose on the way.
Yes, there's been fires. It's been crazy.
Fires all over the place. And this is just in the United States. There's landslides. Like there's all kinds of things going on in the world. And, to what you just said, it would be very, very easy to just snap those blinders on, really think the world is going to hell in a handbasket. Yeah. This shit is burning up, flying away, getting flooded out. It's Noah's Ark time, 2017, right?
Grab a giraffe.
Just be freaking out.
Yeah.
And so today we're really going to talk about why not to freak out or how not to freak out. So let's start with, let's deconstruct the fear a little bit. So especially during times like these, there's even outside of, we have a lot of people listening, very empathic, very sensitive. I've noticed like in my Wild Soul Movement group, in my mentorship group, even on social media, you know, I'm trying to share things and remind people that like the world is not going to hell in a handbasket. And people are feeling really overwhelmed. People are feeling very affected.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. It is a lot. And I think if you are a highly sensitive person and you are feeling effective, first, like allow yourself to feel those feelings. Like you may need to dance it out. You may need to do release writing, which is basically just getting a sheet of paper and just like pouring it out and ripping it up when you're done. You may need to have a cry about it. It's important to, I think, release that, but not take it on, because as highly sensitive people, a lot of times we fall into the misunderstanding that we can help process pain by taking it on. And nothing could be further from the truth. We don't help process pain. We don't help anyone who's suffering by taking on more suffering. We don't help with worry. We don't help with any of those things. But here's the thing. As empathic people, as sensitive people, when we see other people suffering, we want to do something. And so since we don't know what to do, we go to worry because we think at least we're doing something. And it feels like we have something to do with that energy. But again, like all it does is contributes to the worry and the fear that's floating around while all this is happening. And what we can do, because usually people that are highly sensitive also are very high vibrationally. They have like a certain degree of consciousness, and you've got to like muster up that inner strength to get some altitude on the situation and go, okay, I know this is chaos. I know this is a lot of fear, but there's divine order in this. There is divine order in this. And I can help contribute by sending love, by not going into a pattern of worry or anxiety, by not going into suffering myself, by not depleting my own inner resources, by not thinking that I'm helping by suffering, by not going into the savior mentality. Because, you know, again, like it's if we look at it just from the human perspective of like, let's say the hurricanes and the destruction, it's awful. You know, we can make that judgment that it's awful and people are suffering and they're losing their homes. And if we look at it in terms of like what's sort of happening on our planet in terms of consciousness, there is a massive deconstruction. It's like that Kali energy, right? There's a massive deconstruction going on, so there can be a rebuild. We really need to rebuild. We need some deconstruction. And you can even think about in your own life, there have been times where there have been inner hurricanes. There have been fires. There have been times, I call them expectation hangovers, where you've lost something, you've fallen apart, you've gone through some suffering, but there's been a gem in that. There's been a transformation. There was a shedding of something you needed to shed. There was a healing of something that needed to be healed. And one thing that I remind myself of, because I'm an empath as well, is that I'm not God. And my mind is not going to understand why children get abused, why there's a hurricane, my mind, why people murder, like my mind is not going to be able to wrap that around. But then I remind myself, oh, that's not my job. It's not my job to understand the universe. It's not my job to understand why everything happens. It is my job to not contribute to more fear, anxiety, and chaos on the planet. That's my job, to work on this in here.
This is so important, because that comes up. People throw that question out in every space I'm in, like probably once every couple of months, especially as there's things like this going on. I think it's in our human nature to want to understand and to just let ourselves off the hook. And this is, I want to be really clear, this is not a bypass, because it actually, trying to understand it, trying to process it, that actually is the bypass.
Yes.
Because then your effort and your energy and your attention is going towards trying to process, trying to understand something that you're not capable of and that you're not built to.
Right.
Instead of doing what you can do to actually help, to actually contribute, to care for yourself so you don't get overwhelmed. And I know sometimes people, they think that that sounds selfish or delusional or something, but like the real delusion like you just pointed out, would be to think that the human mind can comprehend these massive, massive, massive complex things, because it's so. And what's, now that we've had the experience of so many like other hurricanes, and I've seen a lot of articles of like throwing back people during Hurricane Andrew, which I think was the 90s, people during Hurricane Katrina who were saying, hey, like prepare yourself. There's actually people who are like, take pictures of stuff in your house, save this for the insurance should this happen. And it's all the various ways that people are helping each other. It's like that there's some Mr. Rogers quote about his mom, right? That we've all seen. It's like during times of a tragedy, look for the helpers.
Yeah.
But it's like they're there and we get to see. I know there's so many things to separate us right now, but then we really see it when these things happen, people come together. And on first pass, that's one of the most amazing benefits, although there's many, 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 many more. So thank you for making that point. And people listening, and I know you could speak to this because you're so great with what triggers people and why.
Yeah.
For those of you who are like, F this, these two, easy for you to say, blah, blah, blah. If you are the I don't want to hear it person, that like, we're not saying everything happens for a reason, but we are, right? Like the way Christine said it, which I wrote down because I loved, is like, there's divine order in this. People get really pissed off at that sometimes. Yeah. What would you say to those? We're not saying it's okay, by the way. We're not saying like, you should be grateful for this. We're not. We're acknowledging that it effing sucks at first.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So first is like acceptance doesn't mean moving into acceptance of a situation doesn't mean that you like it. It doesn't mean that you're like, oh yes, the hurricane's good. Like people are coming together and it's awesome. And it doesn't mean that you have to like it. It means that you're not fighting it and you're not resisting it and you're not contributing to the upheaval. Because again, it does not help. Your anger about any of these situations tell me one good thing that it's doing. It's just really not. Even if you're like, well, it's getting me to fly to Florida and help people, you're still showing up angry. Like you may be helping people, get food or bringing canned goods or whatever. But if you're bringing the energy of anger to that situation, check yourself before you land in Florida and shift your energy so you're not bringing that with you, because that's a huge piece of it. And then really often look at, okay, so I'll give you a great example. When Trump got elected, I was on a group coaching call with my tribe. It was actually the personal mastery course, last year's group. Is a personal development course. And I was doing the live coaching call and a woman was so angry that he got elected and the way he treats women and I can't stand this. And I said, are you married? And she said, yes. And I said, tell me about your relationship with your husband. Oh, well, he makes all the decisions and I feel like I don't have a voice and it's really, really hard. And I was like, do you think that part of the reason you're so activated by Trump could be potentially because it's pushing up against a trigger in your own marriage? And she got quiet for a moment. And ultimately the answer was yes. All that anger at Trump, the reason why her emotion was so high and so activated on it was because it was triggering something inside of her that had to do with her husband and not feeling heard and seen, that tied back to her father not being heard and seen there. And so, a lot of us could agree or couldn't agree. Trump wouldn't be our first choice. But I know for me personally, I didn't have this massive, anger about it when I knew that wouldn't do any good. But it didn't activate anything inside me. There have been other things that have, but that particular thing didn't hit a button inside of me, but it hit a button inside a lot of people. Yeah. And so with any kind of event where you feel like you're really triggered or you're really activated, it's, again, consciousness responsibility, not looking out, but looking in and going, whoa, what is this activating inside of me? Like, what fear button is this pushing up against? Did I grow up in a time of chaos? And anytime there's chaos or uncertainty, do all my fear impulses get activated? Yeah. Did I have a time where I felt really unsafe? And so when I see this happening, do I not deal well with my own suffering? I'm so uncomfortable with my own suffering that when I see other people suffer, oh my gosh, it feels so awful to me. I just want to do something about it and I can't stand it. So I'm going to focus more on them and their suffering than really looking at my own suffering and having compassion for that and being able to work my way through this I'm just going to fix all those other people. Does this make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And, something else that I don't think the human mind is meant to process or understand is the concept of oneness.
Right.
But, and I still always like to try to lob it out there for people to understand that when you do your own healing, it really has a ripple effect. Because if we are all one, which I do believe, it's like anything you can clean up. Think of it this way. It's like if the living room was messy and you were picking up, like, say you have a kid and there's toys all over the floor. Every toy that you pick up, like, the room is becoming gradually clearer, cleaner, and neater. So as we handle our own stuff within us, it's like for the collective, like picking up that toy off the living room floor. Is it perfect? No. Am I the savior? Is my own healing going to like save all the beings? No, but it's cleaning up a corner of a really, 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 really big space.
Absolutely.
And it's so worth it. And again, I want to make sure people can hear this because Christine isn't saying don't be angry.
Right.
She's saying feel it and move through it.
Right.
So that you can get to a more useful action.
Right.
Your anger is holy. Like it's just like any other feeling. It's valid. But again, when you stay there and you bring that energy into places, that's what's not helpful.
It's not helpful. And that's what contributes to the resistance, you know? So anytime we're angry, like if something happens in the external world, yes, have your feelings about it. Like get it out. Like let your rage speak. I'm all for, especially women, like getting out their rage. Like if you're pissed off about something and something happened in the outside world, government or whatever, yes, like get that out of your body in a way where you dance or you move or you release, right, or you scream or whatever and move it through. But then look at, all right, like what is this activating inside of me? What's the toy that I can pick up for this? And really, you know, I think it's a quote, the Buddha says, anger is like holding on to a hot coal, waiting to throw it at someone all the while you're getting burned. Mm-hmm. And when we harbor that inside of us, not only does it not do any good, but it messes up our hormones, our digestion, our stress level, like all of these, it's just not good for our body. Neither is feeling sympathy. So I think a lot of empathic people confuse empathy for sympathy. And that's a big distinction. So empathy is more like compassion. Compassion is co-means with, passion means suffering. So compassion is being with suffering. It's not fixing suffering. It's not judging suffering. It's not thinking suffering's wrong. It's not taking on someone's suffering. It's being able to be like, okay, there's suffering here. I hold space for it. I love it. I don't take it on as mine. Sympathy involves judgment. So it's like, oh, that poor person, I can't believe they're going through this. Oh my gosh, it must be so hard. I feel their pain. No, like you don't want to be feeling other people's pain. You really, really want to have that distinction between empathy, being able to relate, have that compassion, and feeling the sorry for, because that puts you into the savior complex and that will drain you.
Yeah. And and this is super important, no matter what is the context of savior, and I've been doing a lot of research, a lot of study, having a lot of conversations, even this month on the podcast, your interview is going up. This is October 2nd. People are listening in real time. And we have a couple of great conversations. We had Kelly Deals on last month, and we're talking a lot more about unraveling racism, other forms of oppression, white supremacy and stuff. And, even like white saviorism, right? Like some people are doing great work in the world, but if they're doing it because they're trying to save people, again, that's like, it's not necessarily an energetic, because if you put yourself in the position of savior, that means that someone else has to be in the position of victim.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And again, like it's an archetype that is old. It's like an old paradigm that we're evolving out of. And again, it also reinforces that separation. You mentioned oneness. If I think I'm saving you, there is a belief in there that on some way I'm better. I'm more enlightened. I have more tools, like whatever. So it perpetuates the victim consciousness. It perpetuates the separation consciousness. And it perpetuates the I'm here, you're there, and I'm going to go. And instead of really, one thing I learned, so a foundation of a lot of my teaching is from my spiritual psychology master's degree from the University of Santa Monica. And one thing that was so key there that was such a part of my learning was really giving people the dignity of their process and knowing that every single person has all the inner resources they need to evolve. And just because we may know better, who do we think we are to go into someone's experience and be like, oh no, you could be doing so much better. I'm here to save you. Like, I remember once, Ron, one of the professors there, told a story about how a man was dying of cancer, and his family like brought in this like psychic medium. They tried everything, and they brought in this medium to come and see if he could communicate to him because he was in a coma, and like get him to heal his body and like whatever. So this medium comes in and has this session with this guy and comes out and tells the family, like, I can't help him. And they're like, why? And he said, the person with the cancer said, you don't know how much I've had to set up in my life and my soul curriculum to have this result. Like, this is what's supposed to be happening for my soul right now. So please stop interfering. That was kind of the message. And that's the thing, like, especially when we get tools and awareness and we're uncomfortable with our suffering, we go in and we don't give people the dignity of their process. And I see this huge in parenting, because I'm seeing so many like teenagers and millennials, especially, whose parents came in and didn't want to see them suffer and made their life, and because they were uncomfortable with their emotions or their hard times or them getting teased, and they go in and fix it because they don't want to see them suffer. And then these people grow up and they don't know how to fail. They don't know how to suffer. They don't know how to be uncomfortable because someone else always made them feel better. Yeah. And we think making someone feel better is loving, but it's not always the most loving choice.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think about like the participation trophies, right? I remember many years ago when I worked at Cutco, one of our like regional presidents, or maybe it was the company. I don't remember his position, but he had little kids who played soccer. And I remember it was like an award ceremony or something. And he got so pissed. He's like, the last place team got a trophy.
Yep.
He's like, you don't get a trophy for that, because here's the thing. We don't want people, we protect people from feeling bad, but if people don't get to feel bad, eventually in life, some shit is going to go down and they're not going to be able to handle it. This is why we have very fragile people.
Yes.
This is why when like big world things are happening, people are immobilized because they're having to deal with like being so overwhelmed by their own emotions. Whereas if they had more experience of, this hurts, I'm in pain, I'm empathic, I feel that suffering, but like I have resiliency, I have tools, responsibility, like you were saying, then we're able to like use our tools and then go be mobile. Let's go help. I can go feed the homeless. I can go volunteer. I can go do whatever, because I'm not going to feel literally incapacitated in my own experience because I have no training in how to deal with tough or uncomfortable things.
Yeah. And I'm also not going to go there in the energetic of sympathy, which is going to put me into the feeling sorry for people and separate me more and put me above. Right. So it's like,
which feels really so shitty to receive.
It does. It does. Like I know times that I've been pitied and it feels icky. It like feels icky. And there's that took an evolution too. That was part of becoming conscious, because I think that one of my stories that I had to update was that a way to get love and attention was to have a problem. You know, so like if I was sick or if I had a problem or if I had something to complain about, you know, people be like, oh, Christine, like, how can I help? And like, I would keep manifesting like bad stuff, the stuff that I didn't even want, because on some level, there was some operating system in here that's like, well, people feel sorry for me, they'll show up.
Yeah.
You know? And I'm so glad I updated that, and I'm able to like receive love in a place where I'm like empowered and not a victim. But it was something that was running in my operating system for a while, and it worked. But let's talk about like quality over quantity, right? So you might have gotten more love and more attention out of that. Like you and I were chatting offline before we started recording, like the payoff is you get more love and attention from people, right? But let's talk about the quality of that. Right. When people are coming from sympathy and they feel sorry for you, they likely feel guilty, or it's hitting on like their own stuff and they're like responding to their own shame. This isn't like a pure kind of love. This isn't like like a clean attention. No, it's not. It's not. And it also like kind of reinforces that dynamic where you're never going to feel, I don't know if I can't think of a better word, but the word equal is coming to mind. Like it's not going to feel aligned, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a position. There's one person playing role of savior and there's one person playing role of victim.
Yeah.
That's not aligned. That's just playing out archetypes that aren't of the highest vibration and just keep perpetuating that.
Yeah.
And keep us out of consciousness. The more we play out those kind of things, the less we are in consciousness and the more we're in the collective conditioning.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love this. I've been geeking out actually just literally like 3 or 4 days ago. I was reading, it's called the drama triangle. Have you heard of this?
No.
So the third piece here, so we've talked about if someone is the savior, that means someone has to be the victim. But then there's a third that rounds out the triangle. And I'm forgetting the name of the person. We'll find a link in the show notes so people can check it out if they want to. I'm forgetting whose like framework this is. And I've heard it in a couple of different ways. But then that means there's like a third energy and that someone has to be either the perpetrator or the tyrant.
Oh, right. Right.
Someone has to get blamed. It has to be someone's fault.
It has to be someone's fault. Yep. Exactly. Because we got to point the finger at it. Because again, like we try to make sense of things.
Yeah.
Right? And if we can point the finger at someone, then, oh, it's this person's fault. And that helps us try to make sense of it. And this is why, I think that kind of emotional and spiritual processing is so important. And having consciousness is so important is because if we just try to understand things through our mind, it's impossible. Like it is absolutely impossible. And one thing that I've just like really accepted is that I am not supposed to understand everything. Like I am not God. Like I am not supposed to understand why things happen. Yes, I can say maybe there's a reason for it. Do I always know what the reason is? Nope.
No.
I don't.
And it doesn't matter. It
doesn't.
And something I like to say, it's not that it doesn't matter, but if you need to know, it'll be glaringly obvious.
It
do
absolutely
not have
will.
to like dig and dive for that because it's just a friggin' waste of time.
Yeah. And if we look at that triangle, which I love that triad, so we live in a hall of mirrors and everything's projection, right? So anytime we're in a situation where there's the victim, the savior, and the tyrant, we've got to look at where are we all three of those things.
Totally.
Because anything that we see, it's like, where are we the tyrant inside ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. Where are we the victim inside ourselves? Where are we the savior? Like, how are we showing up in all of that? Because anything that's triggering us is always reflecting back to us a part of ourselves.
Yeah. It's so fascinating. So I really like the way you work with people and like one of the reasons. So at the end of this interview, Christine has this personal mastery course coming up, y'all, that some of you might be interested in. So we'll give you links to go check it out. One of the things I love is that you do take a very holistic or like integrated approach where you're doing the mind work, you're doing the emotional work, you're looking at the spirituality, you're looking at the energetics of the thing. And you also look at the impacts that things have on the physical body. Yeah. How did you get there? Were you always like holistic minded or you kind of had to find your way into this?
I mean, all of my passion and everything that I've created has come from my own suffering and pain. truly. And then just like feeling so blessed to have studied with who I've studied with and had the training and experience, both life experience and like professional experience that I've had to like be at the place I am because I was put on Prozac when I was 11. I've had lots of health things, family things, relationship things, money things, career things, like any quadrant of life where things could go quote unquote wrong, they have. And I, as an overachiever, that was kind of, one thing I teach about is these, I call them compensatory strategies. And as kids, we come up with these compensatory strategies. And what they are is anytime we feel hurt or victimized or unsafe, anytime we feel less than in any way, our ego to survive has to come up with a way to feel more than, has to come up with something that's like a survival skill, something that makes us feel safe and validated and worthy and deserving. So like for me, I didn't feel like I belonged. I didn't do well socially. I was teased, that kind of stuff. So that's where my less than there's something wrong with me story started to be created. Also being put on Prozac, made me feel like I was definitely broken and something was wrong with me. So my compensatory strategy was, well, then I have to become a high achiever. Like if I don't have this over here, then I have to just like do good and be a high achiever and like make success happen in my life. And the things and other examples of compensatory strategies are like, let's say that you grew up with a lot of like chaos in your house and things felt very uncertain. You might be a bit of a control freak. Like you might just need to control everything and know everything because that's the way it feels safe. Or if maybe like you were able to like make your parent feel better by pleasing them and being like the good girl or the good boy, and you got lots of validation for, oh, you're so good, then you might be a bit of a people pleaser because you want to avoid conflict, and that might be how you compensate. There's all different ways that we do this, and it's very effective on kind of the external goal line of life, but it's very depleting on the internal, the soul line.
I can speak to grew up in a lot of chaos and then controlling. And the other thing is I grew up around people like just a lot of violent communication, a lot of yelling and screaming. So I decided that I would be calm. That didn't mean I wasn't feeling things.
Right. Like underneath, right?
Stuff it. I mean, and, it's funny because my mom was a psychology major and she'd always be like poking me like, are you sure? Like, I know you. You're like blocking this out. Like, what's going on? She would always use the term emotional scars, and that would piss me off. And I'd be like, I don't have any emotional scars. I had all the emotional scars, and I didn't begin unpacking them till like my late 20s. Yeah. Which, well, I'm consciously unpacking them, right? Because when you're not there yet, when you're not doing it consciously, it comes out unconsciously.
Totally.
Like when you're drunk and you're saying the most ridiculous shit to people. I used to do stuff like that all the time. It would be bottled up. Give me a couple drinks and I would go off on somebody.
Yep.
And that is not helpful.
No, it's not helpful. It's not helpful. Or it just leaks out through irritability over time.
Oh, yeah.
Or anxiety over time, or it manifests as a health condition or something like that.
We talk about passive-aggressive behavior here sometimes where it's like, people are like, what? Nothing's wrong. And meanwhile, they're doing the most passive-aggressive, shitty things to everyone.
You're like, really? Nothing's wrong?
Nothing's wrong.
Really?
You're subconsciously doing something that person hates. Like there's so many ways for passive aggressive to express. Yeah. So these things this is also fascinating. So keep going on that.
Oh, so part of like how I like to teach is the biggest thing for me was to start to get an understanding of like my own operating system. Because as you know, Elizabeth, only 3 to 5% of our behavior is consciously driven. So that leaves like 95% that's unconsciously driven. And like, I don't know about you, but I think part of consciousness is getting that percentage like way, way up. I want more of my behavior to be conscious rather than reactive.
Yeah.
We have this sort of reactive behavior that's just based on our conditioning. And that's also based on our story. I mean, this will be a refresher for your tribe, but it's like, we're born this blank slate and we know we're loved and we know we're connected. We know we're enough and we know we're worthy. And then shit happens and we form a story. And all of a sudden this blank slate gets filled with all this stuff about who we are and what life means and what we have to do to be loved and what we have to do to still feel safe and what we have to do to fit in and what our role is and so on and so forth. And this operating system starts to take over. And when we reach a point in life where we're not really creating the results we want. And we're like, wait, why? And we go and try to fix the external things. And this is what I did. I tried to change my career. I tried to change my relationship. I tried to change my family. I tried to change my money things. And I do all these things and the inside still wasn't changing. And I'd be like, what gives? Like, what gives? And I was looking in the wrong direction. I was looking for something out there to change me versus looking at, wait, I'm the common denominator in all of these situations that aren't really working. So what do I need to shift inside myself? Yeah. And a big part for me was like you, like I was kind of that emotional stuffer as well. And antidepressants were super handy for that because I could take a pill to just kind of numb it all out. And I had to like start to feel all those things that were coming out. And that was scary for me, especially as a high achiever in my head, a little bit of a control freak. Like I didn't like getting messy with my feelings. Like that felt very scary to me. So a big part of my work is helping people emote emotions, energy in motion, and how to really feel their feelings in not just a cathartic way, because there's a lot of like workshops that just like teach you how to scream, and that's cathartic, but it's not necessarily therapeutic. And so how you release emotions in a way that actually ties it back to the triggering event so that you can actually heal it. Because, go ahead.
No, you had said something earlier when we were talking offline, because I was asking what was in your course, and I loved that you said that could help you actually release rather than recycle.
Yes.
Because I feel like that's people end up in these loops of like, they're just recycling the same stuff. And granted, we do talk about that life is like a spiral staircase. Like most people do have these like core things that likely is what their soul is here to learn and work out. So like you will revisit some stuff, but progress is about not having to like not being in a hamster wheel, but you're spiraling. So at least you're making progress and things are improving.
Exactly. Yeah. I talk about, with expectation hangovers, which is when, things don't go according to plan or life throws you an unexpected curveball. Just those moments of disappointment. The more tools you have and the more you grow in consciousness, the longer the time between expectation hangovers and the shorter the time you spend suffering in them.
Totally.
So it's to go on a recycling and releasing. So I first learned emotional release work from my coach, Mona, who's no longer physically on the planet. And but so much of her work lives through me, which I'm so blessed because she was one of those people that was just really, really special. And, I'd seen shrink since I was 11. And I remember the first time I sat with her, I was like, whoa, like this feels so different, because she was the first person in kind of that therapeutic role that didn't look at me like I was broken. And she taught me how to do emotional release work. She called it rinsing. And the big difference between recycling feeling and actually releasing it has to do with how we are with ourselves while we're feeling the feeling. So most people, while they're feeling a feeling, are in judgment of themselves.
Yep.
They have an internal commentary about what's going on. They want to analyze why they're feeling the feeling. They want it to be over. They're concerned with how they look. They're not in the energetic of compassion. They're in the energetic of judgment and resistance while the feeling is there. And so what that does is it just recycles it back in, because here comes the feeling up and out, and then here comes the judgment, and it can't get out, and it just kind of goes back in.
Yeah.
So that's why oftentimes after you have a good cry, you just feel tired and drained. You don't really feel, like if you truly released a lot of grief, you're going to feel lightness. You might feel like you ran a marathon in some ways, but you're not going to feel depleted. There's a difference between feeling like tired because you did something like that really like move stuff versus just drained and yuck. And a lot of times people feel worse after they cry because of all the judgment that happens.
This is such an important distinction. And at the time that we're recording this, my 2 episodes from my 33 lessons from my 33rd year just went out. And a lot of what I shared was like all the stuff over the last year of realizing, not until 2 months after I got out of it, that I was in an extremely emotionally abusive relationship with a very narcissistic person. And there was so much anger, and there was so much grief, and there was so much resentment, which because I cried with you sometimes. Like, you helped me with this. You were one of my people who has been there with me. We got close this year during this process, and the gentleness was just the absolute key. Yeah. And it was like, I cannot reiterate for anyone listening, like, it's just like we were talking about earlier. There's ways to do things that's like exponential, and ways to do things that like feels like you're doing something, but it's so inefficient. And just no judgment, letting it go, literally just bearing witness to yourself, not apologizing to other people. Like, how many times have I cried in front of you or other people and caught myself being like, I'm sorry, and being like, wait a minute, I'm not sorry. I just need to get this out of my system.
Exactly, yeah.
And because then it actually does pass. Then it's more like riding a wave rather than being caught in the cyclone. Yeah.
It's funny when I teach about the emotional level in the course, I use the metaphor of a surfer.
Yeah.
And you can't control the ocean, and you're bored, and that leash, that's your compassion.
Mm-hmm.
That's what gets you through the wave of the emotion. And people are so scared of their feelings because they haven't found that place of compassion inside themselves. And really it's like, while you're feeling a feeling, it's like there's a part of you that just needs to be saying, it's okay, let it out. It's okay. Keep going. I'm here. It's okay. It's okay. And I'm amazed that, whenever I teach a women's retreat and, people, everybody cries at some point. Natural. Like we pent up so much. And I say in the opening circle, please do not apologize for your emotions.
Yeah.
And even though I say it, as soon as somebody starts crying, they retract and they're like, I'm sorry. And the shame comes up around the emotion. And it's like, no, let yourself be seen first by yourself and your feelings. Like, let yourself see yourself in your mess, in your emotions. Like, it is so human and it's so part of the feminine. I mean, we are the ocean. Yeah. And unless we let these big feelings come up and out, how do we expect to feel the feelings of joy and fulfillment and passion and everything like that? It's like by suppressing the quote unquote bad feelings, we're holding back so much, everything from our health to our creativity, to our vitality, to our sexuality, to all of it. It's all locked in there. And we think we're keeping ourselves safe by not feeling. And it's actually completely the opposite.
Totally. And the judgment, it's so interesting. So I have this kind of visual of like what you were saying. And then if you have the judgment and like you're shaming yourself for it, it puts a clamp, because no matter what we're feeling, our true nature is always there below the surface, right? And our true nature really is like joy, contentment, health, love, like humans, like all of us. That is our true nature. And when you are just letting yourself feel, you're not imposing like a layer over that internal natural set point, right? So those natural, the joy, the contentment, the compassion, that can be what you witness yourself from.
Yes.
Instead of the judgment. And y'all, that is like hitting fast forward on getting through the thing.
Yeah.
Because you're not adding more abuse to the situation.
Yes. And, I teach how to like really, because I know people may be getting this intellectually, but like how to really feel compassion. Because it is something we need. We all know how to do it. It's more of a remembering process than a learning process. Like, honestly, I feel like everything I quote unquote teach is helping people remember like what's already in there, right? Like, I don't want to give you more information. You have enough information. It's like integration and application and experience. So you can like actually have the experiential learning of what it feels like to have compassion. And, first of all, you do it for other people all the time. If you're a parent, you absolutely do it a lot. You do it for your friends. Like, how to feel the feeling of compassion. And another one of my favorite tools, and maybe I shared it on the last podcast, I can't remember. It's so simple. I have it. Well, I can't reach it right now, but I have a picture of me when I'm like two or three. Mm-hmm. It's so great to have a picture of yourself when you were a little girl or a little boy, if there's any boys watching, like, and just when you're feeling scared or when you're feeling judgmental or that inner critic's flaring up, look at that picture, connect with that little one, like look into your own eyes when you were little. And I guarantee you it will shift your energy, because that's who you're being mean to. That's who you're abandoning in that moment. And so much of our responsibility, again, and how we grow in consciousness is we become that loving parent to ourselves. We become the parent we didn't have. We become the parent that we want in a lover or in someone else. Like, we start giving ourselves that love, and just connecting with yourself in that picture is just a super easy, practical way to start to generate that gentleness and that compassion.
Totally. And then on the other side of that is you also get to be the one who protects you.
Yes.
In all the ways maybe a parent didn't, or they weren't there for you, or something happened to you that they didn't even know about, but then you still blamed them that it was even possible, whatever it is. Yeah, I love this. I love this a lot. And, I want to say something to people listening who are feeling like, I already know this stuff. Like, this is nothing new. Here's the deal, but how are you applying it? Like Christine was just saying. So do you not get triggered by anything? Are you 100% gentle with yourself? Are you like the queen or the king of compassion? Because these are foundational, super, super important things. I know it's sexy to like want to up level and like what's the newest technology, what book is groundbreaking, like what's on the cutting edge. I feel like I'm using the movie voice, like what's on the cutting edge, right? Like,
this fall.
And for those of you who are listening and not watching, I'm doing like all the air quotes I can possibly do. But it's like these foundational building blocks never get old. And if there's chaos in your life, it's like always coming back to the basics.
Yeah.
It's like, and this is why, like, I used to have judgment whenever people use the word mastery. And then I was like, but mastery of the basics could be a lifelong thing. So like, it's real. And I know people who are like, pretty masterful. Like you're very masterful of these things, which is why you teach it, which is why your people get really amazing results. And even you personally, I don't need to air your personal laundry, but I've also been there with you this year through some big challenges in your own life.
Yes.
And watching you navigate those things has been awesome because you use the tools. So anyone listening, like witness, she uses her own friggin' tools.
I do.
It's important.
I've been my own laboratory. That is for sure. You know, I definitely like, I can't get excited about teaching anything that hasn't worked for me. I just can't. No. You know, like I just can't. I even get teary. Like I just it's like eating at a great restaurant and wanting to tell all your friends about it, you know? Because I again, didn't think I could ever feel like I feel today. And I also didn't think that I could go through really challenging things and not have to suffer. I have felt pain. They have been challenging, but my degree of suffering in them and my degree of like being scared to really dive in, like now I can just dive in and go for it and be like, don't like this, but I'm in acceptance of it. Like you shared, like this summer, hard summer. Definitely a hard summer, but the tools were there and the opportunity was there. And again, back to consciousness, it's like, okay, like this is happening for me, not to me. And I'm going to surrender in it because there is going to be some amazing gems that come from this. Yeah. So, and I also think, you know, when you're talking about like the queen of compassion and gentleness, it's also like, do you have what you want in your life? Because if you don't, then there's another degree of mastery to really learn. And do you know what you want? And if you don't, then there's also like another degree of mastery. And I don't mean have in terms of, you know, thinking that something outside is going to fix us. But like, if you feel called to relationship, if you feel called to speak your truth more, if you feel called to be more creative and it's not happening, we can't just go, oh, well, it must not be meant to be. Mm-hmm. We're co-creators. So again, that's another level of taking responsibility for things. Yeah. And same goes, like, so I'm thinking of some of the deeper issues that we've been talking about on the show lately. And it's like, you know, people who are banging into like social justice stuff and people who are coming from places where, you know, they're starting, like you and I are super privileged people. So, you know, if we use the building analogy, like we might have started on floor 7, right? Whereas other people are starting in the basement. Yes. You know, not everyone starts from the same starting line, but the tools work no matter where you're starting from. The tools can be applied in your context. Like you might have more shit to work through straight up because of shitty things that exist in our culture, but the tools can still work from wherever you're starting. Again, because of these basic things, right? The compassion, the gentleness with yourself, the willingness to not suffer, to not put yourself in the position of the victim, all this stuff. So I'm super excited about this. And I think I have a special link, right? Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And depending on when people listen to this, it will either take them to a masterclass that I'm teaching for free on October 11th. To learn more, I'll take you through a bunch of things, like how to figure out like why you're stuck, like what really is like the stuck place, steps to start to get unstuck, and really how to step into what I call your secret sauce so that you start attracting the things that you really want to attract in your life. So that's on October 11th. You can get the replay for that. Or if you're listening to this a little later, you might get a link to an invitation to join me for the 6-week mastery course.
Oh, cool. So yeah, we'll create an easy link. So if anyone wants to check out Christine's course, you can go to untameyourself.com/C as in Christine, H as in Hassler, mastery. So, and also this is episode number 197. So anything else that we talked about, anything that we referenced, some articles on Christine's website, she has a really awesome podcast. We'll put links to all those things in the show notes. And that page will be at untameyourself.com/episode-197. So on our way out here, is there anything I didn't ask you or any closing parting words that you just want to share before we wrap it up?
Well, since you've been talking about so many like hot topics on the show, social injustice and everything there, and kind of wrapping it back to how we started with consciousness again, it's like if we look at life as one big school, and again, we come from a perspective of, on some level, we've chosen our own soul curriculum. Like we've chosen certain things to show up in our life to help us learn things. That means other people have too. And that means on some level, people in certain situations on a soul level, they've chosen it as well. Mm-hmm. And they're learning important things. Even if what may be going on may be horrific, there is a potential for learning. And I think what's amazing about the time we're living in, because social injustice and all this thing has been going on since the beginning of time.
Right.
But we're having a different way to relate to it, which means that a lot of times, nothing changes until the same situation happens again and you respond differently.
Yep.
It's like if you keep attracting unavailable people into your life or narcissists into your life, you don't just heal it and then it stops happening. A lot of times you get a do-over. So you do the healing work and then boom, another emotionally available person shows up. Boom, another narcissist shows up and you get to say no. Mm-hmm. You get to respond differently. And so perhaps some of these things are happening so that we can change our response to them. So look at what's getting activated in you, and are you responding in the conditioned old response that perpetuates these things and keeps them going? Or can you choose to respond differently so that we can start to transform these things and so they can stop happening eventually?
Yeah, this is how we dismantle stuff, y'all. I love that. Thank you so much. So everyone, again, you can find Christine. It's Christine Hassler. She's on Facebook. She's on Instagram. She's in all the places. We'll put all the links in the show notes. We have, again, you can go to untameyourself.com/CH mastery. If you want to check out her free masterclass that's happening on October 11th, and then her course will be open for a little while. And other than that, I missed your face. I do
too.
Living 7 minutes away from Christine and then tacked 2.5 hours on it. So thanks for hanging out with me today.
Oh my God. Always amazing to talk to you. I adore you. I love you. I know the place that you serve people from, and it's so aligned and so full of love, and you're so passionate and so empowering. And I just I see you. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for who you are.
We'll see you later.
There's all these shoulds, which creates an element of shame.
Right.
And so the human soul and the spirit kind of is like, well, wait a minute. We're so divinely and perfectly created. Why are these external people trying to force us in a box? So we begin this early relationship with it's them and it's me, and they're telling me to be a certain way and it doesn't feel right, so it must be their fault.
Right.
And it goes on and it goes on until internally we decide, wait a minute, this is not how I want to be the architect of my life. I want to co-create. And in order to co-create, one must take responsibility and accountability for everything.